Hello everyone, it's good to see you all. I'm going to scroll a little bit to see who's here. A lot of familiar, wonderful faces. Gives me a lot of comfort to see you. And to know that even in these challenging times, difficult times, we can still be together and learn together. It's really wonderful and comforting, and I thank you for that opportunity. We're going to learn Psalm 27. I will begin teaching in just a few moments, but before, maybe just to sing the verses that are more, I think, most familiar from this psalm. There's many verses that are very significant and meaningful, particularly for this time of Elul. But the composers have chosen mostly the verse "Achat sha'alti met Adonai ota avakesh." I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to let you see those verses. They're right there on the top. You see them? Right here. Achat sha'alti met Adonai ota avakesh. Achat sha'alti met Adonai ota avakesh. Shivti bevet Adonai kol yemei chayai. Shivti bevet Adonai kol yemei chayai. So I want to ask you to keep in mind these verses and or these words, and maybe at the end we'll try to answer the question why these particular words are most meaningful for, at least for people who just composed music. And I think in most congregations who recite Psalm 27, these are the verses that are most well known. So why that at this time? I also want to ask you, as we look at the psalm, why this psalm? And there are 150 psalms in the book of Psalms. Why was this psalm chosen to be the psalm recited at this time of year? So as we learn it, maybe we'll get to answer some of those questions. As many of you know, the psalm was designated to be recited from the beginning of the month of Elul and all the way to Sukkot, to the end of Sukkot. Some recited until Hoshana Rabbah, and they stop on Hoshana Rabbah, which is the 7th day of Sukkot. And some recited until Simchat Torah. So this is the psalm that is with us on this journey. It is indicated to be recited twice a day, in the morning, at the end of the morning service, and at the end of the evening service. In some of the Sidurim it says it should be recited at the end of Mincha and not at the end of Arvit, but it doesn't make a difference. It's once in the morning and once in the evening, so twice a day throughout this season, beyond Yom Kippur into Sukkot. So I know that people can post things in the chat, but it's difficult for me to do chat and teach and look at my page and look at the screen. So you have the ability to unmute, so that if there's something really urgent, not can I go to the bathroom, but there's something really, really urgent, you can unmute, and then I'll be
Well,
taking
it's
the
Robin.
question.
You
Just
explain
I
what,
want to know if you can hear me. You can hear me well?
yes, can you hear me? I wanted to know what the word psalm means. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yes. So psalm, it's a song, a poem that is sung to an instrument, composition, a poetical composition to be sung with an instrument. Um, so with a harp or something like that. But I really want to go into the psalm itself. Okay, if you allow me. So I was saying that the psalm is recited from the beginning of Elul until sometime in Sukkot, or even until Simchat Torah. Now, this custom does not appear in the ancient books. It's not in the Talmud. It's not in most of medieval literature. The custom actually started in the 18th century. The scholars know that in the middle of the 18th century, this started to appear in some prayer books at the end of the morning service and at the end of the evening service, with the indication that this psalm to be recited at this time. And it was mostly, this custom spread among certain communities in Eastern Europe, and then as well as through a Sephardic rabbi who lived in Jerusalem in the 18th century, whose name is known, he's known as the Rab Hachida, Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who lived in Jerusalem and then made his way to Italy. He died in Italy, and he actually, in his writings, it appears that he incorporated this psalm as well in the prayers at this time of year, and from there it spread into other communities. Sephardic Jews, usually, with some exceptions, some communities do recite it. Usually Sephardic Jews do not incorporate this psalm. They have it, some do, but it's not the same, it doesn't have the same regularity, or it's not included in the same way as it is in Ashkenazic communities. So let's take a look. I mean, just a curious thing. Some people say that this psalm was incorporated into the liturgy of these days because it has the name of God 13 times. The name of God appears here 13 times in this psalm. And you know what 13 means at this particular time of year when we recite Slichot and then into Yom Kippur? Anybody knows what the 13, what's the significance of the number 13 at this particular time of year?
13 attributes of God.
Exactly. Who was the person who said that?
Audrey.
Okay, Audrey, great. So it's the 13 attributes of God which talk about God's patience and mercy, abounding kindness and forgiveness, which we recite at this time in the prayers of Slichot, penitential prayers, and which are central to the services of Yom Kippur, all the services. The evening service after Kol Nidrei, morning, Musaf, Mincha, and into Neilah, the service is built around the recitation of the 13 attributes. Adonai, Adonai el Rachum v'chanun erech hapayim. You know that. So some people found that this psalm has the name of God 13 times, which therefore parallel the 13 attributes of God's mercy and kindness and forgiveness, and therefore they claim it's a psalm that appeals to God's forgiveness at the time when we most need it. Some other people talk about the fact that this psalm contains some of the themes that are important for us, so we'll examine it and we'll see what some of those themes are. So I'm going to put the psalm on the screen, and so we're going to start from the beginning. and go through the Psalm, not 26, but 27 right here. Okay. And the first thing is called a superscription. It's called Le David. It indicates that it is attributed to David. Now the whole book of Psalms, of 150 Psalms, is entirely attributed to David, but this psalm in particular carries that superscription called Le David, either dedicated to David or written by David. So Le David. And then the psalm begins. Now, maybe the psalm has something to do with David's life as a king, as a warrior, as a parent. We don't really know, but we may be able to discover some of that in the psalm as we go through it. So it begins, Adonai ori ve'ishi mimira. God is my light and my salvation. Here it's translated as help. Shi means salvation. Mimira, since God is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? Adonai ma'oz chayai. Adonai is the stronghold of my life. You know the word oz. Oz means strength. The oz, the power, the sustaining power, the stronghold of my life. Mimi evchad. Whom shall I dread? Just a couple of comments on this verse. You can see, as typical in biblical poetry, in the Psalms in particular, you see a lot of parallels. Adonai ori v'ishi mimira, whom shall I fear? And then the second half of the verse, Adonai ma'oz chayai, another quality of God in my life, whom shall I dread? So some people say that the word fear and dread here are just synonyms or parallel. But some commentators say, no, each one has a different nuance. The word fear and dread have different nuances. So what are the nuances? One of the commentators say, Adonai is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Fear is about the things that we know, that cause us fear. Fear of known things. Adonai ma'oz chayai. Adonai is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I dread? And dread are things that are unknown. You know, anxieties and fears of things that are unknown in our lives. And so, for sure, the poet here is affirming God's presence in his life. Adonai ori, obviously, in one's darkness, or in his darkness, in the poet's darkness, God is there, providing light. So obviously it's somebody who experienced darkness, and now has been able to find in God light in that darkness. Ve'ishi, salvation, maybe somebody who was hopeless, or somebody who was undergoing tremendous challenges in his life, and found support and salvation, and salvation in the sense of being rescued, being rescued from a dangerous situation. And now that this person has found light in the dark, and has found a sense of being rescued, and has found strength, that God has strengthened him. Ma'oz chayai, God is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I fear? This person now feels very confident and affirmed and protected and safe. It was not the case once, but now it is. And then it says, Bikrov alai mera'im. What's the situation? When evil people, from the word ra means evil. Mera'im is evildoers. When evil people, evildoers, come near me, lecholet besari, to devour my flesh, to eat me up, to consume me, to destroy me. Sarai voivaili, people who are my foes and my enemies. You see here synonyms, foes, enemies. Hema kashlu v'nafalu. They stumble and fall. They do not succeed against me. Why? Because I have God's protection. So now, since I told you that this is possibly about David's life, David was a warrior. He fought many wars as a king, and even before, actually not before he was a king, but when he was appointed, before he actually ascended to the throne, already Shaul, who was the king, King Saul, was already jealous of David because he already knew that David might be his successor, and he fought against him. So David had a lot of enemies, and he fought a lot of wars, and he fought for his life and for the life of his family. And so it's possible that it's somebody who has experienced the actual warfare and has found God's protection, who came and destroyed his enemies. Now, since we are not reading these things literally, but we are trying to find meaning, it was incorporated in the book of Psalm as an instrument, a spiritual instrument for us. Of course, this could be extended to any of the battles that we face in life, any of the enemies that we face, whether they're internal enemies, external enemies, or internal enemies. Most of the time our most severe and persistent and difficult enemies are the ones that we carry inside. Our dark side, the forces within ourselves that we can control, and our passions, our tendencies, our neuroses. You fill in the blank. Our desires, are the parts in us that are evil, that bring us into places where we should not go. And so maybe we can identify with that type of battle and feel sometimes, hopefully, like he feels, that God is protecting him and enabling him to, and strengthening him to defeat those enemies. Im tachane alai machane, if an army would camp against me, the machane means a camp, an encampment would come against me, lo yira libi, my heart will not fear. Im takum alai milchama, if war should beset me, bezot abi boteach, in this I trust. The word boteach means to trust, to be confident. And so you can see here a lot of feelings of safety and certainty and confidence. And maybe it's not the experience that most of us have most of the time. I think most of us have moments of confidence, and we have a lot of moments of uncertainty and doubt and weakness. And so I don't know that from the outset we can necessarily identify with these words. I mean, there may be moments in our lives when we feel triumphant, victorious, when we feel that we have been able to conquer our enemies and conquer the darkness within ourselves or about us, and we feel that God has strengthened us. So we can identify with these three verses in the beginning of this psalm. Anybody wants to comment? Let me know. Maybe we'll pause here for a moment. Okay, if you want to comment, you can either let me know in the chat, or you can. The term salvation, means redemption. It means rescue. I mean, it doesn't only refer to the ultimate salvation of humanity. It means to be rescued from a challenging situation, from oppression, from war. It means in that sense, yes, in the present. Anyone else wants to comment? Okay, so let's go back.
Roly,
Yes.
it's Cindy.
Yes, Cindy.
For me, I find that the fear or the dread or the army would be paralyzing, and yet it gives a sense of release of the paralysis by knowing and stating, even he's stating it confidently, but even if we don't, or sometimes feel confident, it's like always remembering that God is there is a way to release the fear and dread.
Right. I mean, it's true, but some people can't find. I was meeting with someone today who was in a pretty in a place of brokenness and very very deep mourning, and who told me, I've been looking for God for 2 years and I can't find God. I can't find God. And I am desperate. I am broken. I am mourning, and I can't transcend my mourning. And so there are situations in life, and for people for whom God is not that close and not that available, people have to work really hard to find that. And so, I mean, I hear you, and I think many of us have that experience, maybe not all the time, but occasionally. And it's a wonderful feeling, to be able to transcend the darkness and to find the moment of confidence and strength, and to find that God is with us, that we're being supported and sustained. But it's not a universal experience, and for some people it comes with very hard work, and sometimes it never comes. So let's continue. If you would mute, if you're not asking a question or making a comment, mute yourself, and we'll continue. We'll see. The poet doesn't stay there. You'll see how it continues. So it says, Achat shalti, and these are the verses that are sang. Achat shalti, me'et Adonai. By the way, just going back to these 3 verses we just looked at, it is also possible, that a person, sometimes we talk ourselves into strength. We talk ourselves into light because we are in such darkness, and we talk ourselves into light. And sometimes it happens that as we motivate ourselves, and so maybe he is scared, and maybe he's in the dark, but he's invoking the God of light and the God of strength in order to come out of that pit. Maybe that's the case. And then comes this verse 4, Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai. One thing I ask of God, Ota avakesh. I ask this thing. Well, why did this turn on? 1 second. Okay. So one thing I ask, this thing I ask, Ota avakesh. Sha'alti means to ask, avakesh means to request or to ask also. Shifti beveit Adonai, I want to be able to dwell, to sit, to rest, like Ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Blessed are, or happy are those who dwell in your house. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, we say that, right? So Shifti beveit Adonai, I want to be able to dwell in the house of God. Kol yemei chayai, all the days of my life. I don't want to leave. I want to stay there forever. Right? Oy, this is driving me crazy. Kol yemei chayai, all the days of my life. For what? Lachazot benoam Adonai, to be able to gaze upon God's beauty. Noam means beauty, means pleasantness. There's something pleasant there in the house of God. There's something beautiful, there's something attractive, there's something calming, there's something that gives me pleasure. Ulevaker, to not only that gives me pleasure, it's the beauty of God. If I go into the house of God, which means in biblical terms is the temple, if I can find my place into the temple, if I can find my place into that central, You know, that's the closest place. You know, the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, is in the temple, is the closest place that you can get to God, spatially speaking. But especially here is a metaphor, right? It's coming near. It's being in the house. It's not being outside. It's being inside. It's being in a house, in the house of God. It's being home, right? It's being home. And in that home, you see, what you see is God's beauty. And ulevaker be'echalo. And levaker in modern Hebrew means to visit. To visit, be'echalo means the palace or the temple. Levaker, to visit. Levaker also means to examine. To examine, to look around, to explore God's temple. One of the Rashi actually brings a commentary from Dunash ibn Labrat, who is the author of the Rory Kra. There were two poets at the time who were rivals. One is Dunash ben Labrat, and the other one is Menachem ibn Saruk. And Rashi brings the commentary of both. And they, of course, differ, because they were rivals and they had terrible fights. And actually, Menachem ben Saruk was always criticizing Dunash and putting him down. So one of them says the word levaker is from the word boker, from morning, from dawn, from the rising of light. Ulevaker be'echalo, and to see the light, the morning, the dawn in God's temple. And the other one says levaker means actually to examine. Okay, so whatever that is, the poet is asking to be dwelling, to be at home, to be inside, to be near God all the days of his life. It's a place of protection, maybe from war, maybe he's being pursued by enemies. And he wants to be in that place, whether it's external enemies, as we said before, real external enemies or real internal enemies. He wants to be in a place inside, protected, at peace, without fear, surrounded by these walls of the temple, and looking at God's beauty. It's a moment of contemplation of God's beauty. And in order to be able to contemplate or to examine or to see the rise of the light in the morning and dawn, you have to be in a place that is calm, that is away from your fears. And then he says, Ki itzpeneni besuko beyom ra'ah. God will shelter me, will hide me in God's sukkah. What is a sukkah? It's a place that is covered, right? Again, another place of protection. Sukkah is a place of protection. Beyom ra'ah. God will protect me in the day of evil. Why is this opening all the time? In the day of evil, Yastireni, he will hide me. Beseter ha'olo, and grant me protection in God's tent. Betzur yeromemeni, and will bring me up high, will lift me upon a rock. Now, there's something interesting here I want to point out a few things. You see the word besuko in God's sukkah, right? So some people say that the word sukkah or sukkah here is a reference to the festival of Sukkot. And that if you go back to the beginning of the poem, the word Adonai Ori refers to light, refers to Rosh Hashanah, and Ishi refers to Yom Kippur. So you have here Rosh Hashanah, salvation is Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot in this verse 5. And that's why we recite the psalm in this season, because it refers, I think it's a sort of a thing a little bit like this, but people see this in this psalm and they claim that's why we recite it at this time. Okay? So, but that aside, this is a person who wants to be, it's peneni means shelter, not only sheltered, it means hidden. and protected in that place. Yastireni. Seter means hiding. You know, somebody who doesn't want to be discovered by one's enemies. He wants to be safe in this place. Not only the house of God, but in God's sukkah. Now, look at the word sukkah. Sukkah, we know it's an impermanent structure, right? And the word aholo or halo is a tent. It's a reference to something nomadic, to a transitionary or an impermanent residence, something that can be folded and then put up somewhere else, right? It's in movement. So here is impermanence, sukkah and tent, and tzur is a rock, is permanent, is firm, is fixed, and upon that rock, God will bring me up. And you see this interplay here between something that is impermanent and fragile, both the sukkah and the tent. Although he finds refuge in that place, it's a place that is still not permanent and somewhat weak and vulnerable. But then comes the tzur, and God will raise me upon the rock, firm. Okay? And here we go into verse 6. Vata, and now, Yarum Roshi, God will lift my head above the enemies that surround me. Aloivai sevivotai, upon the enemies that surround me. Vezbecha be'olo, and I will sacrifice as a sign of gratitude to this God that has lifted me, protected me, sheltered me. I will bring sacrifices in his tent. Zivchei Truah. I don't know exactly what Zivchei Truah is. I have here another translation, the translation of Bob Alter, beautiful translation of the book of Psalms. And he says, sacrifices with joyous shouts. So while the sacrifices are being offered, the shofar is being sounded as a sign of joy. Okay? So here you have the shofar, another reference to this time of year. Ashira v'zamra Adonai, and I will sing and chant to God. So everything is great so far. Everything is celebratory. Everything, the person here has found shelter and confidence. And then it says, Shema Adonai Koli, and here we have a little bit of a transition. Shema Adonai Koli, God, please listen to my voice. Of course, this is what we say at this time of year. Please listen to our voice. Shema Kolenu. When I call, listen to my voice. Vechoneni, and grace me, have mercy on me, and answer me. So, how come? I mean, we were so confident, and God was on his side, and everything was great, and God protected him against all enemies and against vulnerability. And all of a sudden, now the poet says, please listen to my voice. There's a supplication here. There's a transition. And then, Lecha amar libi, to you, my heart said, Bakshu panai. It's a different verse, a difficult verse here. It's not quite clear exactly what it means. My heart said to you, Bakshu panai, seek my face. Now, seek my face is precisely the part of God that we cannot see. God said, human beings cannot see me and live. God said that to Moshe. Moshe says, show me your face. After the sin of the golden calf, which actually has a lot of relevance at this time of Elul, because after the sin of the golden calf, when God was so angry and felt so betrayed and decided to wipe the people out, Moshe said, no, wait. Moshe went up for a second time to the mountain to appease God. And it took 40 days for God to become appeased, and to forgive, and to give the second set of tablets, and to renew the covenant. And at that moment, and this is the journey from Elul, the 40 days from Elul to Yom Kippur, the final forgiveness was granted, according to the tradition, on Yom Kippur to our biblical ancestors, and we relive and we repeat that journey every single year for 40 days, from Elul, when Moshe went up, to Yom Kippur, when God forgave the people. And so just like Moshe did in those 40 days, we plead and we ask for forgiveness, and we try to invoke God's grace and mercy. So here he's saying, Lecha amar libi bakshu panai, my heart said to you, seek my face. It's not clear if God is speaking to us, seek my face, or we are speaking to God, you God, seek my face, or our face. Et panecha Adonai avakesh, for sure, God, I will seek your face. To see God's face means to be in God's presence. And to be in God's presence and to be granted what Moshe was not granted, according to that passage in the book of Exodus, is to receive God's blessing. See, when we say Birkat Kohanim, we say Varechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha, may God turn and lighten God's face. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha, may God's face shine upon you. Isa Adonai panav elecha, may God lift God's face upon you. What is it? Isa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. Right? And may God grant you peace. So God's face is the receiving or seeing God's face, or being exposed to God's face, is seeing God's blessing, God's grace, and God's peace. So this is what he wants. I want to see your face. Al taster panecha mimeni. Don't hide your face from me, because when you hide your face, when you turn your face, the turning of the face, biblically speaking, is that God is not watching, and God is not protecting, and God is not blessing, and terrible things happen. So here you have the psalmist, who in the beginning of the psalm was so confident. Adonai Yori, God is my light and my salvation, and God has protected me against my enemies and has brought me in to God's safe place. And all of a sudden he says, no, please God, listen to my voice when I call. I want to see your face. Don't hide your face from me. So what happened here? There's been a transition. All the confidence of the beginning of the psalm all of a sudden turns into a sense of great vulnerability. Don't hide your face from me. Al tat be'afavdecha. Do not push me aside. Ezrati haita. You were my help. Al ticheni, don't abandon me. Don't forsake me. And we say this in Shema Kolenu. Al ta'azvenu. Al ta'azvenu. It's also a quote from a psalm, another psalm. Don't abandon us. Don't forsake us. He has great fear. Elohei Ishi, you're the God of my salvation. Don't throw me away. Don't throw me out of your presence. So all of a sudden you see a transition here in the psalm. Ki avi ve'imi azavuni. My father and my mother abandoned me. You know, this great sense of being forsaken, of being orphaned, that many of us have experienced with the loss of a parent. You know, you feel that the ground under you is sort of opens, and the ground upon which you stood, which was firm, which gave you a sense of protection and a foundation in the world, all of a sudden that ground opens, particularly people who've lost both parents. Ki avi ve'imi azavuni. When my father and my mother have abandoned me, forsaken me, you know, that the primary relationship that a human being has, when you lose that primary relationship, Adonai yaspeni, God will take me in. So this psalmist is now talking himself into confidence that when everything will be gone, every sense of safety and any foundation will be removed from under his feet, he's hoping that God will bring him in. Horeni Adonai darkecha. There's a beautiful thing here. The word horeni, from where the word Torah comes, which means, horeni means to guide, to instruct, to show the way. And a parent is called hore. The word hore in Hebrew means parent. So horeni, be my parent and show me the way. And more is from the same word, the one who shows, who guides, who teaches. Horeni Adonai darkecha, show me, guide me on your path. Unecheni beorach mishor leman shorerai, and guide me and lead me beorach mishor, on a path that is leveled, that is even. Leman shorerai, because of my foes. Keep me even keeled, even to walk even, so I won't be shaken and I won't fall. So this is somebody who's anticipating trouble. It's not somebody who was, like in the beginning of the psalm, so confident. This is somebody who is imploring for protection, who's felt abandoned, and who's asking God to lift him and protect him. Al titeneni benefesh sarai. Don't abandon me. Benefesh sarai, I mean, it's also difficult to translate. I've checked a number of different translations. Here it says, to the will of my foes. He says, Bob Alter, he says, interesting translation he has here. He says, do not put me in the maw, M-A-W, of my foes. I had to look it up. It means this part through which we breathe. Nefesh, like breathing. Life breath. Nefesh is life breath. So the maw of my foes, I don't really understand so much what it means, but the throat or the gullet of my foes, so let not my foes grab me by here, maybe. Why? Ki kamu bi edei sheker. Because false witnesses, edei sheker, a false witness, have risen against me. So maybe this is somebody who's not, after all, facing military battle, but is facing legal battle. I'm being judged, I'm being tried, like we are on these days, in particular in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Yom Hadin. And I have false witnesses who are accusing me. Vifei Hamas, and people who who express corrupt things, who say lies about me. Somebody who's in trouble. Don't abandon me to those people. And then it says, Lulei he'emanti. Now, the word lulei, you see, has dots underneath. It's not clear exactly why, but it's in order to indicate there's something here. And it probably, some commentators say it's because it's an incomplete sentence. The sentence is, had I not the assurance, had I not believed that I would see God's goodness in the land of the living, ... The sentence is not completed. Probably I would not survive if I could not see God's goodness in the land of the living. Were it not for my being able to see or to believe that I can see. I want to believe that I can see God's goodness in the world. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't survive. What is it worth living for if you can't believe that you're going to see goodness in the world? And these are very challenging times, right? And if we don't believe that some goodness is going to come out of all of this, why live? So we have to hold on to that faith. I mean, he's looking for faith. You see him wrestling for faith. So he started with being very confident, very strong, very much in the light. And then he felt uncertain. Please, God, listen to my voice. Don't abandon me. And then now he is saying, I wish I can believe. Can I believe? I'm not sure. Lulei means were it not. Now, if you look at this word from the back forward, from left to right, what does it spell?
Elul.
There you go. So some people say that's why we recite the psalm. The word Elul is encoded in here. And then it says, Kavel Adonai. Trust, put your trust in God. Chazak ve'yametz libecha. Let your heart be strong. Be strong, and let your heart be strong and bold and firm. And put your hope in God. In other words, we don't know the outcome. In the beginning, I felt very confident. And then I felt very vulnerable. And then I am looking for hope. I'm looking for goodness. I'm looking for faith. I'm looking to strengthen myself with faith and to trust in God. But I don't really know how things are going to turn out in my life. So maybe this is a person's journey. You know, we begin feeling very strong and we begin very confident and we feel blessed. And then there comes a moment in our life when we are out of balance, we feel vulnerable, shaken. We begin to face challenges that we can't surmount and overcome. And we are asking God for God's blessing and God's protection. Don't hide from me. Be with me. And then in the end, if it weren't for my faith, for trying to find faith, I couldn't live. And I don't know how things are going to turn out. And so I'm going to stop the sharing here, and we're going to begin maybe a few minutes to share. But maybe this is why this is the psalm for this season. You know, to look for faith, to look for hope, to search, to try to regain confidence, maybe the confidence that we once had. This is a psalm that allows us to express our fears, is a vehicle for our fears. Maybe the psalm says it better than we can. Or maybe it opens. Once we read the psalm, then or we read it a few times, and we make it ours, then we can then find our own words to express our fears, to express our hope that God won't hide God's face from us, and that we will find confidence. Kaveh means trust. So that we will find trust that we can go on living meaningful lives. So I'll stop here. And I ask
don't
you
know.
again, why is the psalm for this season? And then I asked you another question. Why the song that we sing mostly is Achat Sha'alti? I actually would like to sing other lines in the psalm, but we're stuck with Achat Sha'alti. Why is it so attractive? So maybe we'll take a couple of comments. You want to put in the
I
chat?
don't know how to get on the main screen, Rabbi, but
Who's speaking now?
Sylvia.
Okay, Sylvia.
I don't know how to get on the main screen. It's something funny, but what really struck me here, not only the meaning of it, but the translation. You know, I read it in Sim Shalom, and it didn't resonate like what I saw on the screen and what I heard from you. So should I get Bob Alter's book? What do you recommend?
Bob Alter's book is a fantastic book. It also has some scholarly notes. Sim Shalom is a siddur where
It's very poorly translated.
It's not a translation, it's an adaptation. It's not a faithful translation. In order, he tried Jules Harlow, Rabbi Harlow, tried to produce a Siddur that could be prayed in English. You know that not everybody is familiar with the Hebrew. He tried to make an English adaptation that people could actually pray. Now I'll show you another thing. I'll show you something very interesting. Let me find it here, and I'll show you this translation. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna share it with you, and we'll read through. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, this is Reb Zalman's translation, and this is it's a faithful translation, but it's the way we would speak, right? Bob Alter is very literary, a very literary translation. Look at this. Yah, you are my light, my savior. Whom need I dread? Yah, with you as my strong protector, who can make me panic when hateful bullies gang up upon me, wanting to harass me, to oppress and terrorize me? They are the ones who stumble and fall. Even if a gang surrounds me, my heart is not weakened. If a battle is joined around me, my trust in you is firm. Only one thing do I ask of you, Yah. Just this alone do I seek. I want to be at home with you, Yah, all the days of my life. I want to delight in seeing you when I come to visit you in your temple. You hide me in your sukkah on a foul day. You conceal me unseen in your tent, and also raise me beyond anyone's reach. And now, as you have held my head high, despite the presence of my powerful foes, I don't remember, I think there's a mistake here. Making music to you, Yah. Listen, Yah, to the sound of my cry, and being kind, answer me. My heart has said, I turn to seek you. Your presence is what I beg for. Don't hide your face from me. Don't just put me down. You who have been my helper, don't abandon me. Don't forsake me. God, my support. The father and mother have left me. You, Yah, will hold me securely. Please teach me your way and guide me on the straight path. Discourage those who defame me. False witnesses stood up against me, belching out violence. Don't let me become the victim of my foes. And here he puts these words. You see, I would not have survived if I had not hoped that I would yet see Yah's goodness fully alive on earth. So friend, you too hope in Yah. Be sturdy and make strong your heart, and most of all, keep hoping to Yah.
Beautiful.
Can you send this to us?
I will try to have Beth send it to you tomorrow. I can
Roly?
send it to you right now.
It's actually in part of the resource packet. We studied this with Deborah Sexmans yesterday.
Ah, terrific.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't
So
see
tell
it.
Sylvia how to find it, okay?
Okay.
Mark.
Sylvia, tomorrow I'll talk to you.
Just,
Okay.
Okay.
Mark.
just two observations. One, on the structure of the psalm itself, ends and then connects, loops right back to the beginning,
Exactly. Beautiful.
Yes.
which is where he says hope in God, where we then pick up in the very beginning, because this is the hope he's now instilled in himself, and we have this confident.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right. But the loop is different. He had it in the beginning. He lost it by the end. He's looking for it again. And he's hoping to get back there.
No, but yep, okay. I mean, I think he regains it and we start again. But I also think that the movement of the psalmist, the confidence and then the fear, and then wanting to be in God's house and then having to come back out and face the world, is very similar to the feelings I have, for example, during the Noraim. Inside this sanctuary, devoting ourselves to this prayer, and we feel, after getting through all of the strenuous work, we start feeling calm and protected, to realize that when the 25 hours are up, we have to go back out in the world.
Beautiful.
But I also think that that's what this whole month of Elul is about as well. That process of going and feeling very confident, and when you really dissect yourself and go through it, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of stumbling, and you have to come back to your hope.
Beautiful.
And that's what
Absolutely.
I never saw it that way, but thank you so
Yeah.
much. That's what I feel.
Come with confidence, and then as you begin to do the self-examination, so on, you begin to doubt. I'm really not that great, and
Right,
I'm not really
right.
feeling that safe.
Right.
I'm feeling very vulnerable. The more I explore, the more I see. And now that I'm paying attention, I'm not being distracted by my work, my family, my this, my that, going out to restaurant. Now that I'm doing this internal work, I see that I'm really not that
Right.
safe.
Roly,
And
can
I'm
I
trying
just,
But
now.
I
May
think,
I add that
I-
this is
Thank you. That's
very
great.
human?
Thank you so much, Miriam.
I would like, can I just make one
So
I must say,
one at a time. Wait a second.
oh, I'm sorry.
Lois first, and then
I was just going to say, this is so human. This is so real. This is so close. And that to me is, we think of our faith in God and how we bring God close. And then when we talk about these things, we really feel as though this is what it means to be human.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Roly?
Yes. Sheldon, let's make it short, and then Deborah short.
Very short. I already put something in the chat. Just to raise this issue, I've always had difficulty with David because of his background and his history. He was not, I'm sorry, he was not a very nice
He was
person.
not a very nice person, but he was a very sensitive person.
Well,
And you know what? Neither are we.
yeah, but we went
And that's why. I mean, he was rotten in many ways, just as we are, and that's why.
He went way beyond. He had private
That's
army.
why. Well, but that's what I mean, his life is very messy, very messy. He has very high points and he has very low points, and I think that's why we can so much identify, because he's able to express all of that in such powerful ways that we can, I mean, at least I feel that we can connect with the highs and the lows and the in-betweens. We'll let Deborah, and then Asa will be the last comment.
I just want to say that I think the vulnerability in the prayer is a vulnerability that comes from being in relationship. In the case of the psalmist with God. So in the beginning, you see everything God has given the psalmist. The psalmist, in a sense, realizes how much he needs God. And all he wants is to be in God's sanctuary and protection. And that's what he's asking God. I think he then realizes, my God, what happens if God doesn't give me this?
Yes.
And turns his face. So his vulnerability comes out with the, don't turn your face from me because I have nothing left without you. And I think we experience that not only with God, but also in love, in our relationships. When you really connect, you are vulnerable.
Yeah, thank you.
Could I add something really brief that connects? Do you mind?
Who's
Is there
that?
time? Lois Dubin.
Yes, Lois. Yes.
Thank you. I think I'm really struck by the juxtaposition of being hidden, protected in the sukkah, but then being raised up to the rock. And
Yes.
It sounds triumphant, but that's the moment when the vulnerability comes in, and suddenly the voice is imploring, I'm not so safe up here.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
now
I'm exposed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's Zalman picked it up in his translation. When I'm up there, now I'm exposed. Beautiful. So sometimes when we go very high, we find ourselves in a vulnerable place. That's the place we want to go to, but once we get there, it's like I have vertigo. Asa.
I just think this is wonderful, and how you went through all this and the comments of the people made. But I think it's really important to go back to what you said about we end at a place of uncertainty. And here's where I would sort of disagree with Mark. So at the end of the service, yeah, we're going out, and we're not really back at the beginning. And I think what you went through with the psalm is also, you go from a place of trust and some kind of innocence and almost like childish, and a different adult place. The psalmist is at a different place at the end. It's like, this is the real world of uncertainty.
Yes, yes.
What hit
yes.
me from what you were saying.
Thank
It's
you.
not the same. It's not really just a circle, I think. Like
Well,
somewhere else.
it could be that he finds, you know, that aspiration of that search for
Yes,
faith will bring him, but we don't know.
we don't know. We're not there yet.
I think that's, yeah, we don't know. And I think that the beauty and the greatness of this psalm, that's why it's such a powerful psalm, is that it matches the human experience of most of our time, most of the time. Sometimes we feel very certain, sometimes we feel, but most of the time we feel very uncertain.
It was
Will I
great.
be able or won't I be able? And so here, I'll close with this. You know, we're doing a lot of work, a lot of spiritual work, and I hope everybody's doing and intensifying. And then we'll come to Rosh Hashanah, and then we'll come to Yom Kippur, this year in a very different way than in previous years. And then the question at the end of Yom Kippur is, have I succeeded or haven't I succeeded? And we'll see it during the year. You know, we'll see, am I in a new place? Have I found renewal? Have I been able to undo myself for certain burdens that I carry with me? Have I been able to have insights that I can apply? I don't know. Have I been able to find faith? Will I see God's goodness in the earth of the living? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. There's the great uncertainties in front of us, and we're all struggling for faith. So with that, I thank you so much for being here. On Thursday, I think before Minyan, check in the BJ website. I'm going to have another session. It's going to be more participatory, also about the learning of this week, which has been Psalm 27, so we can continue the conversation there.